toxicants in our environment, food, water, and air, especially certain pesticides, a pesticide called paraquat, certain dry cleaning chemicals, if you can believe, dry cleaning chemicals, including a chemical called trichloroethylene and another one called perchloroethylene, and air pollution, I think, are the three major environmental risk factors for Parkinson's disease in the United States and likely around the world. There are many different parts of the brain, and neurologists like me tend to look at it from an anatomical structure, and that different parts of the brain control different parts. So when you're talking to me, I'm hearing and understanding what you're saying, but in an part of the brain called Wernicke's, which is on the left part of my brain. When that information is then conveyed to a part of my brain where it generates speech called Broca's area. And so there's a loop that's responsible for language. And just like there's a loop responsible for language, there's a loop responsible for vision. So when I see you, it gets processed, goes through my retina, and then back to the part of my brain that processes it, and eventually back to the occipital lobe. And there's a part of our brain that's responsible for movement. And there's a part of our brain that's responsible for memory. And in people with Parkinson's disease, is that circuit that's responsible for one of the circuits that's responsible for movement. There are multiple. One of the circuits that's responsible for movement is damaged. In Alzheimer's disease, one of the circuits that's responsible for memory is damaged. Now, we don't know why chemical like air pollution, for example, is linked to both Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, and we don't know, at least I don't know, why some people who are exposed to that chemical get to air pollution develop problems with memory and some develop problems with movement. But the circuits that are impacted lead to what diseases are manifest. Individuals with Parkinson's and Alzheimer's disease, when you look at their brains under the microscope or after they die, you see high levels of iron. And your brain is really, really, really selective in terms of what it lets in and what it lets out. And it's not terribly keen to bring in heavy metals into the brain because many of these heavy metals can be toxic to brain cells. And it's not really clear how the iron got there. Some people have looked at nutrition, but largely they found that people who have a high iron diet are more likely to have iron in the brain, because I think the brain's really good at protecting itself from excess dietary intake of different chemicals. But the nose, I think, is the front door of the brain, and the nose bypasses the normal blood-brain barrier that protects the brain, and I think it's exploiting it. And so when you see air pollution, you can actually see air pollution like in Los Angeles. You see a haze, and that haze is made up of little pieces of dirt and soot. It's called particulate matter. Hitchhiking on the pieces of dirt and soot are toxic metals like lead from leaded gasoline, iron from brakes, and platinum from catalytic converters. So I think that iron is hitchhiking on these little tiny pieces of dirt and soot, are being inhaled, going through our nerve responsible for our smell, and going back to the smell center of our brain, and then spreading to other parts of the brain. I think that's how iron is entering our brain. And we increasingly know that from studies that high levels of air pollution increases your risk for Parkinson's disease and especially Alzheimer's. So we think Parkinson's disease is a brain disease and classically causes tremor, slowness of movement, problems with balance, and a shuffling gait. In 2003, a really smart German pathologist, Heiko Braun, postulated that Parkinson's disease, a brain disease, does not begin the brain. He said, when you look at under the microscope, you first see the pathology of Parkinson's in the smell center, which we were discussing right above the nose, and we see it in the nerve cell body of the vagus nerve, which you might know connects the brainstem all the way down to the gut. And because of this, the latter finding, he thought that Parkinson's disease was due to neuroinvasion from an unspecified toxin. He thought maybe a virus. I think that's less likely, or only a small contributor, that enters in through the gut, then rides up or leads to pathology spreading up the vagus nerve into our brainstem, and then to the parts of the brain that are responsible for movement, those motor circuits that are controlled. And even now, 20 years later, my colleague, Dr. Borkhammer, and some of our friends and I just wrote a paper arguing that most of Parkinson's disease begins in the nose through inhaled toxicants, inhaled air pollution, inhaled pesticides, inhaled dry cleaning chemicals, or less commonly for Parkinson's disease, is ingested through ingested pesticides, ingested dry cleaning chemicals that are in our water, or even probably less likely, small amounts of air pollution are actually swallowed as well.